Riscate a una joven apache del rio, y su padre volvió con un regalo, que nadie imaginaba. The town nearby was small and everyone knew each other. People often came to the river to relax, watch the fish, or just enjoy the sound of flowing water. That afternoon, everything seemed peaceful, almost like time had slowed down. Birds flew lazily across the sky, and children's laughter could be heard in the distance. People were strolling along the riverbank, some walking dogs, others sitting on rocks and skipping stones. The air was fresh, carrying the scent of wet earth and grass. Among the people near the river, one man was walking alone, his mind wandering with thoughts about the day ahead. He was tall and strong, with steady hands and a calm presence. He liked walking by the river because it gave him time to think, away from the noise of the town. He had crossed this path many times before, but he never expected that this afternoon would change his life forever. Suddenly, a loud, terrified scream broke the calm. The sound was sharp, urgent, and full of fear. It came from the water, and it made everyone around stop and look. People turned toward the river and saw a small figure struggling in the current. It was a young girl, no more than 10 or 11 years old. She had slipped from the shallow edge and was now being pulled by the strong river flow. Her small hands clawed at the water, trying to grab something solid, but the current was too strong. Her dark hair stuck to her wet face, and her eyes were wide with panic. She called for help, but the sound of the rushing water swallowed her words. The man walking along the riverbank felt his heart leap. Without thinking, he ran toward the water. Every second counted. He could see the girl drifting further downstream with each passing moment. Other bystanders shouted, but none moved closer. Fear held them back, but he didn't hesitate. He rolled up his sleeves, stepped into the shallow water, and then plunged into the deeper part where the current pulled him. The water was icy cold, cutting through his clothes and chilling him to the bone. His muscles burned as he pushed forward, feeling the river's strength against him. He reached the girl just as she was about to lose her balance completely. She had begun to sink under the water for a brief moment, and that was all the push he needed to act faster. He grabbed her small arms firmly but gently, making sure not to scare her even more. "I've got you. Hold on," he shouted, his voice carrying over the roar of the river. The girl clung to him, shivering and crying, her body trembling from fear and cold. He could feel her heartbeat racing, a tiny drum of terror against his chest. The current fought against them. Each step toward the riverbank felt heavier than the last. His boots sank into the soft, muddy bottom, and the water tried to pull both of them downstream. He focused on steadying himself and guiding the girl safely. He talked to her calmly to distract her from fear. "You're safe now. I won't let go. Just a little more and we'll be out." Slowly, carefully, he edged closer to the shore. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he reached a solid spot where the water was shallow enough to stand. He lifted the girl out of the river and she collapsed into his arms, exhausted and shaking. Her clothes were soaked, her hair plastered to her face, and her small body was trembling from cold. He held her close, wrapping his coat around her to keep her warm. People on the riverbank had gathered by now, watching silently. No one applauded or shouted, but their eyes were wide with admiration and relief. They had witnessed courage in its purest form. The girl looked up at him, her eyes still filled with fear but also shining with gratitude. She whispered, almost inaudibly, "Thank you." Her voice was small, but it carried the weight of everything she had just been through. He smiled gently and patted her shoulder. "You're safe now. That's what matters," he replied. After a few moments, they moved to the riverbank where the girl could rest on the grass. Some people offered blankets and towels, and others brought warm drinks. Her legs were stiff from the cold water, and she shivered, but she was alive. That simple fact felt miraculous to everyone present. People began talking quietly among themselves, amazed at the bravery it took to jump into the river. The man stood back slightly, brushing water from his clothes, feeling a mix of relief and humility. He didn't see himself as a hero. He simply saw a child in danger and acted. Soon, the girl's father arrived, running toward them. His face was pale, and his eyes were wide with worry. He had been searching frantically when he heard the news of his daughter near the river. Seeing her safe in the man's arms brought tears to his eyes. He rushed forward, enveloping his daughter in a tight embrace, holding her as if never wanting to let go. The girl clung to her father, sobbing softly, finally feeling completely safe. The father looked at the man who had saved his daughter. Words didn't come easily at first. He only shook his head in disbelief, then extended his hand. "Thank you, I don't know how to repay you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. The man shook his hand gently and replied, "Just seeing her safe is enough." The small crowd slowly dispersed, leaving behind a sense of awe and inspiration. Stories of the rescue would be told in the town for days, and people would speak about it with admiration for the man's courage. But for him, it was a quiet moment of reflection. He realized that life could change in an instant, that danger could appear when least expected, and that sometimes simple acts of bravery could have the greatest impact. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting golden light over the river, the girl and her father walked home together, her small hand tightly holding his. The man watched them go, feeling a strange but warm satisfaction. He knew this encounter would stay in his memory forever. It wasn't just about saving a life. It was about connection, humanity, and the delicate balance between fear and courage. Later that evening, he couldn't stop thinking about the girl and her father. He remembered the fear in her eyes, the strength it took to save her, and the silent gratitude in her father's gaze. Even though he didn't seek recognition, he felt a quiet pride that he had acted when it mattered most. That one afternoon by the river had become more than just a moment. It had become a story of hope, bravery, and the kindness of strangers. The river continued to flow, indifferent to the small drama that had unfolded along its banks. But for the man, for the girl, and for her father, it was no longer just a river. It was the place where courage met chance and where lives were forever changed. And little did he know, the girl's father would soon return, carrying a gift that would surprise him, a gesture that would turn a simple act of courage into a lasting bond of gratitude and respect. But that was a story for another day, one that would deepen the meaning of that afternoon by the river. After the terrifying incident at the river, the days that followed were filled with a mixture of relief, curiosity, and quiet admiration. The man who had saved the young Apache girl continued with his daily routine, but he could not shake the memory of the girl's terrified eyes and the desperate struggle against the river. Every time he passed the riverbank, he remembered the cold water rushing past him and the way her small hands had clung to his arms. He knew that what had seemed like a brief moment to others had been a lifetime for the girl. The girl's father, a proud man with deep respect for his family and traditions, spent hours thinking about how he could express his gratitude. In Apache culture, actions and gestures carried weight. Words alone were often not enough. The father was quiet by nature, but his thoughts were full of ideas about how to honor the man who had risked his life to save his daughter. He wanted to show that the act of courage had not gone unnoticed, and that a connection had been formed that could last beyond words. He visited his daughter often, speaking gently with her about the river. "You must be careful," he said, his voice soft but firm. "The water can be kind and gentle, but it can also be strong and dangerous. You have been lucky, and it is because of a brave man that you are safe today." The girl listened carefully, her small hands fidgeting as she absorbed every word. She had never thought about the river in this way before. To her, it had been a place for fun and play, but now it held a sense of respect and caution. The father also began preparing something special. He spent hours selecting materials and thinking carefully about what would be appropriate as a gift. In Apache tradition, a gift was more than an object. It was a symbol of respect, gratitude, and a bond between people. He wanted the man to understand that his bravery was honored, that it mattered deeply, and that it had created a connection between their families. He thought about giving something simple at first, but then he realized that only a meaningful gift, carrying tradition and care, would truly express his feelings. Meanwhile, the man who had saved the girl found himself reflecting not only on courage, but also on the sense of responsibility that comes with helping someone in need. He did not consider himself a hero, yet the community had already begun sharing stories about his bravery. Neighbors praised his courage, some quietly, some openly. People who had witnessed the event spoke about how calmly he had acted, how he had managed to stay focused despite the danger, and how he had treated the girl with kindness even in the chaos. As the days passed, the girl grew stronger. She returned to her normal activities, although she carried with her a new awareness of the river's power. She spoke about the man who had saved her with admiration. "He didn't hesitate," she told her father one evening. "Even when the water pulled me, he held on. He saved me." Her father nodded, silently acknowledging both the truth of her words and the depth of gratitude he felt toward the rescuer. One morning, the father decided to visit the man in person. He walked quietly through the small town, carrying a wrapped package carefully in his hands. It was a simple but thoughtful gesture, meant to express feelings that were difficult to put into words. When he arrived, the man greeted him with a modest smile, trying to downplay the importance of his actions. "It was nothing," he said. "I just did what anyone would have done." The father shook his head, a firm look in his eyes. "No," he replied gently but clearly. "It was not nothing. What you did was more than courage, it was life itself. You saved my daughter. That is not something that can be ignored." The two men sat together, talking quietly. The father explained that in Apache culture, acts of bravery and kindness are often recognized through gifts that carry history and meaning. "A gift is not just an object," he said. "It is respect, gratitude, and a story. Today, I bring you something to show that your courage has touched my family and me." The man accepted the package carefully, unsure of what to expect. He could feel the weight of the gesture, even before opening it, and a sense of curiosity mixed with humility filled him. When he unwrapped the package, he discovered a hand-woven Apache blanket, its colors rich and vibrant, each symbol carefully stitched. The patterns told stories of protection, strength, and connection to nature. The man looked at the blanket in awe. It was beautiful, yes, but it also carried meaning he could not fully understand at first glance. The father explained each design slowly, pointing to the symbols and telling their stories. One symbol represented courage, another represented the river's strength, and another represented protection for children. The man listened intently, realizing that this gift was not just about the rescue. It was about honoring life, courage, and human connection. He felt a deep respect for the father and the traditions of the Apache people. He understood that his act of bravery had resonated far beyond the riverbank, creating a bridge between two lives and two families. The blanket was a reminder not only of that moment of courage, but also of the importance of gratitude, honor, and mutual respect. As the afternoon turned into evening, neighbors began to notice the meeting. Word spread quickly, and people came to see the blanket and hear the story behind it. They were fascinated not just by the craftsmanship, but by the culture and thoughtfulness represented in the gift. Some asked questions about the symbols, the history, and the traditions of the Apache people. The father explained patiently, sharing what he could. The man who had received the gift felt humbled by the attention, but also grateful that the story of bravery and respect was spreading. Over the next few days, the girl continued to recover from the trauma of her near drowning. She spoke often about the river and the man who had saved her. She began drawing pictures of the river, the rushing water, and the moment she had been rescued. In her drawings, the rescuer appeared as a strong, protective figure, guiding her to safety. Her father encouraged her, praising her understanding of courage and respect. He also reminded her that true bravery often comes quietly, without applause or recognition. The man, meanwhile, displayed the blanket in his home, in a place where it could be seen and appreciated daily. Each time he looked at it, he remembered the girl's eyes, the icy water, and the rush of adrenaline as he pulled her to safety. But more than that, he remembered the father's quiet strength, his careful explanation of the symbols, and the deep respect conveyed through the gift. It was a constant reminder that courage, gratitude, and human connection were intertwined in ways that could last a lifetime. As the bond between the man and the family grew, he began to understand the depth of the lesson he had learned that day by the river. Saving a life was about more than physical strength. It was about compassion, presence, and the willingness to act when it mattered most. The father's gift, and the thought behind it, taught him that recognition could take many forms, some more powerful than words. Through this small but meaningful act, two families from different backgrounds had formed a connection that bridged culture, language, and experience. The story of the rescue and the gift soon became well known in the small town. People talked about it with admiration, not only for the bravery of the man who jumped into the river, but also for the father's thoughtful way of expressing gratitude. It became an example for children, showing them that courage and respect are values worth honoring. The community began to see the river not only as a place of beauty, but also as a place where lives can intersect unexpectedly, creating lasting bonds. In the evenings, when the sun cast long shadows across the riverbank, the man often walked by the water again. This time, however, his thoughts were different. He remembered the girl smiling shyly after the rescue, the father explaining the meaning behind the blanket, and the warmth of human connection that had grown from a single act of bravery. He realized that sometimes the smallest actions could create ripples far beyond what anyone could imagine, touching hearts and forming friendships that would endure. And though the days continued as usual, a quiet anticipation grew in the man's mind. He knew the father's gift had been only the beginning. He could sense that their connection would deepen in ways he could not yet predict. The river, which had once been a place of danger, had become a place of learning, gratitude, and hope, a place where courage and humanity met, shaping a story that would live on in their hearts forever. The days passed, and the man continued his life, but he could not stop thinking about the gift from the young Apache girl's father. The blanket was more than a piece of fabric. It was alive with meaning, carrying symbols that told stories of courage, protection, and respect. Every morning when he looked at it, he remembered the rushing water, the girl's terrified eyes, and the effort it had taken to pull her to safety. The blanket reminded him that a single act of bravery could connect people in ways he had never imagined. The girl's father visited often, though quietly. He was a man of few words, but his presence carried warmth and respect. Each time he came, he brought small things, sometimes a hand-carved ornament, sometimes herbs, or sometimes stories of the river and the land where his people had lived for generations. The man listened attentively, fascinated by the rich culture he had never known closely before. Each visit deepened the bond between them, revealing a friendship built on courage, gratitude, and mutual respect. One day, the father invited the man to walk along the outskirts of the river, where the current was gentler and the trees grew thick. The young girl came along holding her father's hand. She had grown stronger and more confident, though she still kept a careful distance from the river's edge. The father spoke softly as they walked. "The river is like life," he said. "It gives, it teaches, and sometimes it takes. You have learned this already, but our family wanted to show you another part of our world." They reached a clearing where the sunlight streamed through the trees, creating patterns on the ground that seemed almost magical. The father laid down the blanket, pointing to its intricate designs. "Each symbol here has a meaning," he explained. "Some represent courage, some represent protection for children, and some remind us that even the smallest acts can make a great difference. This gift is not just a thank you, it is a story, a memory, and a bond." The man looked closely at the patterns. He could see how every stitch had been made with care, how each color carried a message. He felt humbled by the thoughtfulness and depth of the gift. He realized that bravery was not measured just by physical acts, but also by the way people honor those acts and the connections they create. "I feel honored," he said quietly. "I did what anyone would have done, but this is more than I expected. It means a lot." The father smiled, nodding gently. "Sometimes it is not about the act itself, but about the connection it creates. We wanted you to understand that you are part of our story now. The girl and I will remember this always, and we hope you will too." The young girl, standing close by, looked at the man with wide, trusting eyes. She reached out slowly and touched the edge of the blanket. "It's beautiful," she said softly, "just like you helped me." Over the next few weeks, the man began to understand the depth of the bond that had been formed. He spent time with the girl and her father, learning small things about their daily life, their traditions, and their respect for nature. He watched how they honored the land and the river, how they spoke quietly but thoughtfully, and how they showed gratitude in simple, meaningful ways. Every moment with them reminded him that life was about more than rushing through days. It was about connection, kindness, and shared experiences. The girl began to open up more, telling stories about her daily life, her school, and her dreams. She spoke about her love for the river, despite the danger it held, and how she wanted to learn to swim safely one day. The man listened patiently, giving advice gently, and sometimes teaching her small things about water safety and courage. Through these interactions, he saw her grow stronger, more confident, and more aware of the world around her. One afternoon, the father and the man sat by the river together, watching the water flow over rocks and under the trees. The father spoke about the river as if it were alive, explaining how it shaped the land and the lives of everyone who depended on it. "It is a teacher," he said. "It shows us that even when things are difficult, we can find a way forward. You saw this when you saved my daughter. You understood its power and acted without hesitation. That is courage." The man nodded, feeling the weight of his actions more deeply now. It was one thing to act in a moment of danger, but it was another to see the impact of that act on a family, a community, and a culture that valued life and respect so deeply. He realized that every act of bravery, no matter how small it might seem to him, had the power to ripple outward, affecting people in ways he could never have predicted. As the weeks turned into months, the bond between the man, the girl, and her father grew stronger. The blanket became a symbol of that bond, displayed carefully in the man's home, but also used in small moments of connection. Sometimes the girl would sit on it while telling stories. Sometimes the father would spread it on the grass during quiet afternoons together, and sometimes the man would simply look at it, reflecting on the lessons it carried. One day, the father brought another gift. It was a small, carved wooden figure of a river, with tiny symbols etched into the surface, representing life, courage, and protection. "This is for you," he said. "It is a reminder that our connection is alive, and that the river which brought us together will always be part of our story." The man held it carefully, understanding that this was more than a gift. It was a continuation of the friendship and respect that had begun with the rescue. Through this growing friendship, the man also learned more about Apache traditions. He learned how storytelling was an important part of passing down history and values, how symbols were used to teach lessons and honor deeds, and how gratitude was shown through actions rather than words alone. These lessons fascinated him, and he felt honored to be included in such a personal and meaningful way. The young girl, too, grew from the experience. She learned about caution, courage, and the value of human kindness. She began to see the world not only as a place of fun and adventure, but also as a place where care, respect, and bravery mattered. She started helping others in small ways, showing empathy to her friends and family, and remembering the man who had saved her without hesitation. She understood, even at a young age, that her life had been touched by someone willing to act when it mattered most. Neighbors and friends in the town noticed the bond as well. They saw the girl walking with her father and the man, sometimes sharing a laugh, sometimes sitting quietly by the river. People admired the quiet strength of the relationship and were inspired by the respect and gratitude that flowed between them. Children in the town began asking questions about courage and kindness, and adults spoke of the incident as a reminder that small acts could make a lasting difference. Through it all, the man continued to reflect on the lesson the river had taught him, that life could change in an instant, that courage often comes quietly, and that human connection is one of the most powerful gifts one can experience. He realized that the rescue had been only the beginning of something much larger. It had started a chain of respect, gratitude, and friendship that would endure far beyond the riverbank. And as he watched the girl and her father one evening, sitting together on the blanket, talking quietly and sharing stories, he felt a sense of peace and fulfillment. He understood that this bond, born from a moment of danger, was now part of both their lives and his. It was a reminder that bravery and kindness were never wasted, that respect and gratitude could create connections across generations and cultures, and that the river, which had once been a place of fear, had become a place of learning, love, and friendship. The father, the girl, and the man often sat together quietly, enjoying the simple presence of one another. Sometimes they watched the river flow. Sometimes they shared stories or laughed at small, happy memories. And though the river continued on, indifferent to the events that had taken place along its banks, it held a new meaning for them. It was the river where courage and kindness had met, where respect had been given, and where a bond had been formed that would last a lifetime. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between the man, the young Apache girl, and her father grew stronger. The blanket, carefully woven with symbols of courage and protection, remained a central part of their connection. Every time the man looked at it, he thought about the river and the moment he had plunged into the cold water to save the girl. But now the blanket had become more than just a memory. It had become a symbol of trust, respect, and an unspoken promise between their families. One afternoon, the father invited the man to a quiet part of the riverbank that few people visited. The sunlight filtered through the trees, creating patterns on the water's surface that sparkled like tiny diamonds. Birds sang softly in the background, and the sound of flowing water created a peaceful rhythm. The girl ran ahead, laughing as she jumped over small stones along the river, her earlier fear of the water fading slowly with every careful step. She had learned to respect the river, but she no longer feared it. She had seen courage in action, and it had changed her. The father turned to the man and said, "There is something I want to give you, something that carries the history of my people and the gratitude of my family." He reached into a woven bag he had brought and carefully pulled out a small, polished wooden box. The man accepted it with curiosity and respect, aware that whatever was inside would hold deep significance. He could feel the weight of it in his hands, not just physically, but emotionally as well. The father opened the box slowly, revealing a small, hand-carved figurine of an eagle in flight. Its wings were outstretched, carved with intricate detail, and its eyes seemed to hold wisdom beyond human understanding. The father's voice was calm but filled with meaning as he explained, "In our culture, the eagle represents courage, vision, and protection. When we saw how you risked your life to save my daughter, We knew you carried these qualities. This is our way of honoring you, and our way of saying that you are part of our story now." The man looked at the figurine with a mixture of awe and humility. It was beautiful, yes, but it also carried a message far deeper than any words could express. He felt honored, but also humbled by the thoughtfulness and care behind the gift. He realized that this was not just a token of thanks, it was a bridge between two lives, two families, and two cultures. It was a symbol that courage and respect could create lasting bonds that went beyond language or tradition. The young girl watched quietly, her eyes shining. She reached out slowly and touched the figurine, her small fingers tracing the carved wings. "It's like you," she said softly, looking at the man, "strong and brave and protecting me." The man smiled gently, feeling warmth in his heart. He knelt slightly to meet her gaze. "You are brave too," he said. "You held on and trusted me when it mattered most." "That is courage too." The girl smiled shyly, understanding that courage could take many forms, sometimes big, sometimes small, but always meaningful. Over the next few days, the man displayed the eagle figurine next to the blanket in his home. Each morning, he would look at both gifts and remember the river, the struggle, and the bond that had grown from a moment of crisis. He realized that bravery was not only about the act of saving a life, but also about the responsibility and care that followed. The father's gift reminded him that gratitude and respect could deepen relationships in ways that actions alone could not. The father visited often, bringing stories from his childhood and lessons passed down from his elders. He spoke about the river, the land, and the importance of understanding nature. He taught the girl, and sometimes the man, about the symbols in the blanket, the stories behind each carving, and how they represented lessons in courage, patience, and respect. Through these moments, the man learned that culture was not just about traditions. It was about values, wisdom, and understanding life in a way that shaped character and choices. The young girl grew more confident each day. She learned to respect the river, to understand its power, and to navigate it carefully under supervision. She began helping her father with small tasks and shared stories of her day with the man. Through these interactions, she learned not only about courage and respect, but also about kindness, empathy, and how actions could influence the lives of others. She understood that life was full of choices, and that even a single choice could create a ripple effect far beyond what one could imagine. One evening, the father invited the man to sit near the river and reflect on the meaning of the gifts. The sun was setting, casting warm golden light across the water. The man could hear the gentle lapping of the river and the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. The father spoke, his voice calm but carrying deep weight. "These gifts are more than objects. They are reminders of courage, gratitude, and human connection. They show us that even in moments of fear and danger, trust and kindness can create something lasting. This is the way we honor life, and the way we remember those who act with bravery." The man listened silently, absorbing the meaning behind each word. He thought about the river, the girl, and the moment he had acted without hesitation. He realized that courage and kindness could never be measured simply by deeds. They were measured by their impact, the bonds they created, and the lessons they left behind. The gifts had shown him that respect, gratitude, and understanding could transcend culture and tradition, creating connections that were timeless. The young girl leaned against her father, listening quietly. She had grown from the experience, learning lessons about bravery, trust, and the power of human connection. She understood now that courage was not only about confronting danger, but also about caring for others, acting selflessly, and respecting the world around her. The gifts had taught her about the strength of family, the importance of gratitude, and the way love and respect could be expressed in tangible, meaningful ways. The man felt a deep sense of humility and gratitude. He realized that what had started as a simple rescue had become a journey of learning, understanding, and connection. He had been given not only gifts, but also insight into a culture rich in wisdom and tradition. He understood now that the river, which had once seemed dangerous and unpredictable, was also a teacher. It had shown him the meaning of courage, trust, and the profound impact one person could have on another. Over the following weeks, the bond between the man, the girl, and her father continued to grow. They spent quiet afternoons near the river, learning from each other and sharing stories. The girl practiced swimming under careful guidance, slowly gaining confidence and skill. The man learned more about Apache culture, their respect for nature, and the lessons embedded in their symbols and traditions. The father continued to guide both of them, showing patience, wisdom, and gratitude in every action. The gifts, the blanket and the eagle figurine, remained central to their connection. They were displayed in places of honor, reminders of courage, respect, and the bond formed that afternoon by the river. Each time the man saw them, he remembered not only the rescue, but also the quiet lessons about human connection, trust, and the meaning of gratitude. He realized that these gifts were living symbols of a story that would continue to grow, shaping lives and inspiring others in ways he had never imagined. And so, the man, the young girl, and her father continued their journey together. What had begun as a terrifying moment at the river had transformed into a deep friendship, rooted in courage, respect, and gratitude. The gifts were more than objects. They were symbols of the connections that life could create when people acted with bravery and kindness. And although the river continued to flow, indifferent to the events that had unfolded along its banks, it had become a place of memory, learning, and inspiration, a place where courage met compassion, and where gifts carried the power to unite hearts across generations and cultures. The days after the father's gift passed quietly but meaningfully. The man, the young Apache girl, and her father continued to spend time together, building a bond that had grown from courage, trust, and respect. The blanket and the carved eagle figurine had found permanent places in the man's home, serving as daily reminders of that unforgettable afternoon at the river. Every time he looked at them, he remembered the girl's terrified eyes, her father's quiet gratitude, and the strength of human connection that had emerged from that single, courageous act. One morning, the father invited the man to walk with him along a secluded part of the river that the girl loved. The sun was warm, and the water sparkled under the light, reflecting the trees and the sky above. The girl ran ahead, laughing as she jumped over smooth stones, her confidence growing with each careful step. She had learned to respect the river's power while also enjoying its beauty, a lesson born from the day she had almost been swept away. As they walked, the father spoke thoughtfully. Life is like this river. It flows, sometimes gentle, sometimes strong. It teaches us to be careful, to be brave, and to help others when they need us. Your courage that day reminded us that there are people willing to act without thinking of themselves. That is something rare and precious. The man listened, humbled by the depth of the father's words. He thought back to the moment he had jumped into the river, feeling the icy current against his skin, and holding the girl tightly as the water tried to pull her away. That memory, once filled with adrenaline and fear, now carried the weight of understanding. The understanding that courage is not just about moments of action, but also about the impact those moments have on others. The girl ran back to them, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers she had picked along the riverbank. "I wanted to give this to you," she said shyly, offering them to the man. Her small hands trembled slightly, but her eyes shone with sincerity. The man accepted the flowers with a gentle smile. "Thank you," he said. "This is very kind of you." The girl beamed, happy to share a small gesture of her own gratitude. As they sat by the river, the father explained more about Apache culture. He spoke of the importance of honoring bravery and showing respect through gifts, stories, and actions. "Gifts are not just things," he said. They carry meaning, history, and connection. The blanket, the eagle, and now your small flowers. They all tell a story of courage, gratitude, and friendship. The man realized that each gesture, no matter how simple, had the power to communicate far more than words ever could. In the following weeks, the man found himself thinking often about how a single moment could change so many lives. The river had been a place of danger, fear, and uncertainty. Yet it had also become a place of learning, growth, and connection. The girl's life had been saved, but in turn, the man had learned lessons about empathy, respect, and the enduring impact of kindness. He began sharing these lessons quietly with others in his community, hoping to inspire courage and compassion in people around him. One afternoon, as the man and the father sat by the river alone, the father handed him another small gift. It was a leather-bound notebook, worn but carefully preserved. Inside were drawings, symbols, and stories from the father's own life and the life of his people. "This is for you," the father said. "It is a part of our history, a story of courage and life lessons. You saved my daughter, and we want you to understand that your actions are remembered and cherished." The man turned the pages carefully, admiring the drawings and the stories. Each symbol and illustration carried meaning, telling tales of bravery, survival, and respect for nature and people. He felt deeply moved, understanding that this gift was not only a token of gratitude, but also an invitation to be part of something larger, a culture that valued courage, kindness, and the connections between humans and the world around them. The girl, now more confident and curious than ever, sat nearby, occasionally pointing to the drawings and asking questions. "What does this symbol mean?" she asked, pointing to a bird etched on one page. The father smiled, explaining, "It means vision and freedom. Birds watch over the land, and they remind us to be brave and wise." The girl nodded thoughtfully, learning not only about her own culture, but also about how courage and wisdom could guide her in life. As weeks turned into months, the bond between the man, the father, and the girl became like family. They shared stories, meals, and quiet moments by the river. They celebrated small victories, such as the girl learning to swim safely, or the man learning the meanings of more symbols. The gifts, the blanket, the eagle figurine, and the notebook, remained central to their connection, reminding them of the courage, gratitude, and love that had brought them together. The man began to understand the true meaning of the father's initial promise, that gifts, like actions, carry power and purpose. The blanket had taught him about respect and protection, the eagle figurine about courage and vision, and the notebook about history and wisdom. Each gift was a layer of connection, building a bridge across cultures, generations, and hearts. He realized that gratitude was not just expressed in words, but in understanding, care, and the willingness to honor the lives of others. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, the three of them sat quietly by the river. The father broke the silence gently. "The river brought us together. It gave us a moment that could have ended in tragedy, but instead it became the start of something beautiful. Courage, kindness, and gratitude are gifts that last forever. Remember that and pass it on." The girl looked up at him, her eyes wide and shining. "I will," she whispered. The man nodded, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. He realized that this moment and all the moments that followed had taught him lessons he would carry for the rest of his life. Courage, he understood now, was not only about physical strength, but about compassion, respect, and the choices we make to help others. The story of the river rescue and the gifts that followed spread quietly through their small community. People admired the man's bravery, the father's thoughtfulness, and the girl's resilience. The river became a place of reflection and inspiration, a reminder that even in moments of fear, hope and connection can flourish. Children learned about courage and gratitude through the story, and adults found inspiration in the quiet acts of kindness that could change lives. As time passed, the man often returned to the river alone, reflecting on the journey. He would sit quietly on a large rock, looking at the flowing water, thinking about the girl, her father, and the gifts that had created such a strong bond. He realized that the river was not just water and rocks, it was life, teaching lessons of bravery, gratitude, and human connection. It was a place where ordinary people could become heroes, where small acts of courage could create ripples that touched hearts far beyond the moment itself. The young girl grew stronger every day, learning from her father and the man, embracing the lessons of courage and respect. She began to understand that life is a balance of learning, acting, and caring for others. She saw that a single act could change not just her life, but the lives of those around her. And in those moments, she began to dream of the future with hope, confidence, and a sense of responsibility for the world she lived in. The father, proud and quiet, watched the bond grow, knowing that his family had gained not only safety but also friendship and understanding. The gifts he had given were not simply objects. They were symbols of gratitude, lessons, and connection that would continue to shape lives for years to come. The story of that day at the river had become more than a memory. It had become a living example of the power of courage, respect, and love. And so, life continued, intertwined with the lessons of that unforgettable afternoon. The man, the girl, and her father remained connected, their lives forever linked by the river, by courage, and by the gifts that carried meaning far beyond their physical presence. They knew that while the river flowed endlessly, the impact of bravery, kindness, and gratitude would remain in their hearts forever. It was a story that would never fade, a story of courage, connection, and the quiet power of human compassion.